They say the truth always finds a way back into the light, no matter how many years it spends hidden in the shadows. Nathan Cole never believed that. At 38 years old, the self-made millionaire had built his life on certainty, discipline, and control. In his world, every investment had a forecast, every risk had a strategy, and every outcome could be managed if you were smart enough to see it coming. That was why the moment his world fell apart happened in the one place where everything was supposed to be perfect. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis Manhattan shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers worth more than most family homes. Golden light spilled across polished marble floors. A string quartet played softly from a raised platform, while New York's most influential business leaders mingled beneath towering floral arrangements imported from California earlier that morning. It was the annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala, one of the city's most prestigious charity events, and Nathan stood at the center of it all. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, he accepted congratulations with the effortless confidence that had made him one of Wall Street's most admired figures. Cameras flashed. Executives shook his hand. Reporters waited eagerly for his speech. From the outside, his life looked flawless. But perfection is often the most convincing disguise. Nathan lifted a crystal glass and glanced across the ballroom, preparing to make his way toward the stage, when something unusual caught his attention near the entrance. At first, it was only laughter. The kind of laughter that felt genuine in a room filled with carefully rehearsed smiles. His eyes shifted toward the sound. Then time seemed to slow. 3 children stood beneath the chandelier near the ballroom doors. They couldn't have been older than 5. Dressed elegantly for the occasion, they looked completely at ease among the city's elite. One little boy adjusted his bow tie with serious concentration, while another whispered something that made his brother burst into laughter. Beside them, a little girl twirled once in her navy blue dress before stopping to smooth the fabric with quiet pride. Nathan felt something strange tighten in his chest. He couldn't explain why. Then one of the boys looked up. The crystal glass nearly slipped from Nathan's hand. Blue eyes. Not similar. Not familiar. Identical. The same striking shade that stared back at him every morning in the mirror. The same eyes his mother once called the Cole family signature. Nathan blinked. Then another child turned. The same eyes. The same expression. The same slight tilt of the head. His pulse quickened. Suddenly the noise of the ballroom faded into the background. The laughter, the music, the conversations. Everything disappeared beneath a growing sense of disbelief. And then he saw her. Standing a few feet behind the children was a woman in a champagne gold evening gown. Her dark skin glowed beneath the chandelier light like polished bronze. Her posture was graceful, calm, unshaken. 5 years had passed since he had last seen her, but Nathan recognized her instantly. Vanessa Brooks, his ex-wife, the woman who had vanished from his life carrying nothing except her dignity and a broken heart. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. Vanessa rested a gentle hand on the little girl's shoulder and smiled at something one of the boys said. It was a simple smile, warm, genuine, effortless, yet it shattered something inside him more completely than any accusation ever could. Because as Nathan stared across the ballroom, one impossible question echoed through his mind. Why did those children look exactly like him? Vanessa Brooks had once been the center of Nathan Cole's world. Long before the private jets, magazine covers, and multi-million-dollar acquisitions, there had been a rainy October afternoon in Brooklyn when a young financial analyst spilled coffee across an investor's presentation, and a woman with a warm smile handed him a stack of napkins without saying a single word. Nathan remembered that smile. He remembered how different she felt from everyone else in the rooms he spent his life navigating. Vanessa never seemed impressed by money. She never cared about titles. While others saw the rising star of Wall Street, she saw a man who worked too many hours, skipped meals, and carried more pressure than he ever admitted. Over time, she became the one place where he could set down the weight of the world. Their relationship had surprised everyone. Nathan came from one of Manhattan's oldest and wealthiest families. Vanessa was the daughter of a public school teacher and a firefighter from Queens. Their backgrounds could not have been more different, but somehow that difference became the foundation of something beautiful. For 3 years they built a life together. Sunday mornings were spent walking through Central Park with coffee in hand. Holidays were filled with laughter in her family's crowded dining room. Even after Nathan became one of the youngest executives in his industry, Vanessa remained the calm center of his increasingly chaotic life. She celebrated every victory, but never allowed success to change who they were. When he proposed beside the Hudson River at sunset, she said yes before he could even finish the question. For a while, it seemed like they had proven everyone wrong. The wedding photographs still existed somewhere in Nathan's penthouse. A smiling bride, a hopeful groom. Two people convinced love was stronger than any obstacle. But some storms do not arrive all at once. They gather quietly beyond the horizon until one day the sky is unrecognizable. Nathan's family never fully accepted Vanessa. They were polite in public and distant in private. Invitations became rarer. Conversations became colder. Small comments disguised as concern slowly built invisible walls around the marriage. Nathan told himself it did not matter. He told Vanessa the same thing. Yet every year the pressure grew heavier. His mother questioned whether Vanessa truly belonged in their world. Business associates whispered behind closed doors. Society magazines treated her like an outsider who had somehow wandered into the wrong story. Vanessa endured it all with remarkable grace. She smiled through uncomfortable dinners. She ignored subtle insults. She refused to let bitterness take root. But even the strongest hearts grow tired. Nathan could see it now, standing across the ballroom 5 years later. The woman beside those children looked different. Not weaker, stronger. The uncertainty that once flickered behind her eyes had disappeared. In its place was quiet confidence, the kind that could only be earned through hardship. As Nathan watched, one of the boys tugged gently on Vanessa's hand. She leaned down and listened carefully before brushing a hand across his shoulder. The gesture was simple, familiar, maternal. His chest tightened again. The little girl laughed and pointed toward the enormous crystal chandelier overhead. Another boy wrapped both arms around Vanessa's waist. She smiled and kissed the top of his head. The scene felt painfully natural. Like a family. A complete family. Nathan swallowed hard. 5 years ago, he believed that chapter of his life had ended forever. Yet standing beneath the golden lights of the gala, surrounded by strangers and applause that suddenly meant nothing, he found himself staring at the one thing he had spent years convincing himself he no longer missed. And for the first time since their divorce, Nathan realized that the greatest loss of his life might not have been losing Vanessa. It might have been never learning the truth about everything that came after she walked away. The room continued moving around him, but Nathan felt strangely detached from it all, as if he were standing behind glass watching someone else's life unfold. Applause erupted near the stage. A donor was being recognized for a 7-figure contribution. Cameras flashed. Champagne sparkled beneath the chandeliers. Yet none of it reached him. His attention remained fixed on Vanessa and the 3 children. 5 years. 5 entire years had disappeared into a silence he had never questioned deeply enough. At the time, it had seemed easier to accept the ending than confront the pain behind it. After the divorce, Nathan buried himself in work. He expanded Cole Ventures across 3 continents. He appeared on magazine covers. He purchased a penthouse overlooking Central Park. Every achievement was supposed to prove he had moved on. Instead, each success only seemed to make the empty spaces larger. There were nights when he stood alone beside floor-to-ceiling windows and stared at the city lights below, wondering why victory felt so hollow. He always blamed the marriage. He told himself some relationships simply failed. Some people were not meant to stay. It was a convenient explanation. Clean, simple, safe. But now, looking across the ballroom, nothing felt simple anymore. One of the boys picked up a bread roll from a nearby table and grinned mischievously before Vanessa gently shook her head. The little boy immediately returned it to the plate with an exaggerated sigh that made his siblings laugh. Nathan stared. The expression was familiar. Too familiar. He had seen it countless times in old photographs of himself as a child. The same playful resistance. The same dramatic surrender. His pulse quickened. Another child tilted his head while listening to Vanessa speak. Again, the resemblance struck him like a physical force. It was not only appearance. It was mannerisms, gestures, tiny details impossible to manufacture. Nathan looked away for a moment and pressed a hand against his chest. Logic demanded another explanation. Coincidence, imagination, wishful thinking. Yet every time he looked back, the questions only multiplied. Then the little girl reached into a small silver purse and proudly pulled out a folded drawing. Vanessa crouched beside her, studying the paper as if it were a priceless masterpiece. The child beamed. Nathan felt something tighten painfully in his throat. He remembered how Vanessa had always treated people. She listened as though every voice mattered. She celebrated the smallest victories. She made ordinary moments feel important. That quality had once drawn him to her more than anything else. Across the room, one of the event coordinators approached Vanessa and greeted her warmly. They exchanged a brief conversation before the woman smiled at the children and walked away. Vanessa clearly belonged here. She was not hiding. She was not surviving. She was thriving. The realization surprised him. For years he had quietly assumed she had disappeared to start over somewhere far from New York. Yet here she was at one of the city's most prestigious events, carrying herself with a confidence he had never seen before. Whatever life she had built, after leaving him, she had built it well. Nathan's gaze drifted back to the children. Suddenly one of the boys turned toward him. Their eyes met across the ballroom. The child studied him with open curiosity for several seconds. Then he smiled politely before returning his attention to his siblings. The simple gesture hit Nathan harder than any boardroom defeat ever had, because for a brief moment he experienced a feeling he could not name. It felt like recognition, not certainty, not proof, just a quiet pull deep inside his heart. And for the first time that evening, Nathan stopped wondering whether those children were connected to him. A far more frightening question had begun to take shape. If they truly were his, what else had he never been told? The distance between them was no more than 30 feet, yet it felt wider than the 5 years that separated their lives. Nathan stood motionless near the edge of the ballroom while guests drifted around him in elegant waves of conversation and laughter. Across the room, Vanessa remained unaware of the storm unfolding inside him. Or perhaps she was aware and simply refused to acknowledge it. That possibility unsettled him even more. For years he had imagined what he might say if he ever saw her again. He thought there would be anger, accusations, questions about the past. Instead, all he felt was uncertainty. The woman before him no longer resembled the person who had walked out of his life carrying a single suitcase and a wedding ring she never wore again. There was strength in the way she carried herself now, a quiet confidence that did not seek attention and therefore commanded it naturally. The children gathered around her like planets around their sun. Every glance they gave her carried trust. Every smile seemed effortless. Nathan found himself studying the small details. The little girl reached for Vanessa's hand without looking because she already knew it would be there. One of the boys leaned against her shoulder while listening to a story. The third child pointed excitedly toward the dance floor, and Vanessa laughed softly before saying something that made all 3 children grin. The sight stirred an ache. He could not explain. Somewhere deep inside, a memory surfaced. A spring afternoon nearly 7 years earlier. Vanessa sitting on a blanket in Central Park, her head resting against his shoulder, her voice light and hopeful as she spoke about the future. She wanted a family someday, not because she cared about tradition or appearances. She simply loved the idea of building a home filled with kindness. Nathan remembered teasing her about planning too far ahead. Vanessa had laughed and kissed his cheek before telling him that some dreams were worth protecting long before they arrived. The memory hit him harder than expected. Back then he had believed there would always be more time. More opportunities, more chances to fix whatever went wrong. Life had taught him otherwise. Suddenly, one of the event hosts approached Vanessa carrying a microphone. After a brief exchange, Vanessa nodded politely. The host smiled and guided her toward a reserved table closer to the stage. As she moved through the ballroom, several guests greeted her warmly. Nathan noticed something surprising. These were not casual acquaintances. They were influential people, foundation directors, hospital executives, philanthropists. They knew her, respected her, admired her. Whatever path she had taken after leaving him, it had led somewhere remarkable. Then the little girl glanced over her shoulder. Her bright blue eyes landed directly on Nathan again. This time she whispered something to her brothers. All 3 children turned toward him simultaneously. Nathan's heart pounded. For several long seconds, they simply looked at him. Curious, calm, unafraid. Then the little girl tilted her head and smiled. It was a small smile, innocent and kind. Yet Nathan felt the ground shift beneath him, because he had seen that exact smile before. Years ago, On a woman standing beneath autumn leaves beside the Hudson River, saying yes to a future they both believed would last forever. And as the children followed Vanessa toward the front of the ballroom, Nathan realized he could no longer remain a distant observer. The answers he had spent 5 years avoiding were standing only a few steps away. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage, and the ballroom gradually settled into silence. Crystal glasses rested on white linen tables. Conversations softened into whispers. Beyond the towering windows, Manhattan glittered beneath the night sky like a sea of scattered diamonds. Nathan barely noticed any of it. His attention remained fixed on the table near the front of the room where Vanessa sat with the 3 children. Then something unexpected happened. The host smiled warmly toward their table. Before we continue tonight's program, we would like to recognize someone whose work has changed countless young lives across New York City. A large screen illuminated behind the stage. Photographs appeared one after another. Community centers, children's hospitals, scholarship ceremonies, families smiling through tears. Nathan frowned slightly. Then he saw her face. Vanessa. The ballroom erupted into applause. Nathan felt another wave of disbelief. The host continued speaking. 5 years ago, she founded the Bright Horizons Initiative, an organization dedicated to supporting single-parent families and expanding access to pediatric healthcare in underserved communities. Since then, her foundation has helped more than 12,000 children across the state. More applause followed. Several guests rose to their feet. Nathan remained frozen in place. He had spent years believing Vanessa disappeared after their divorce. Somehow he had never learned that she had quietly built something extraordinary. The screen displayed another photograph. Vanessa standing beside a newly opened children's clinic. Then another image. Vanessa accepting a humanitarian award. Then one more. Vanessa surrounded by dozens of smiling children beneath a banner carrying the foundation's name. Nathan swallowed hard. During their marriage, Vanessa had often talked about helping families. She dreamed about creating programs that would give struggling parents opportunities she never had growing up. Back then, they used to stay awake late into the night discussing impossible plans and hopeful ideas. Nathan remembered encouraging her. He remembered promising to support every dream she had. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten those conversations. Vanessa had not. The host invited her to the stage. For a brief moment, she hesitated before standing. One of the boys squeezed her hand. The little girl adjusted the fabric of Vanessa's gown with careful concentration. Another child whispered something that made Vanessa smile softly. Then she walked toward the stage. The room welcomed her with another standing ovation. Nathan watched as she stepped beneath the spotlight. 5 years ago, she had left his life carrying heartbreak. Tonight, she stood before New York's most influential leaders as a respected philanthropist and community leader. The transformation was breathtaking. Yet what struck Nathan most was not her success. It was her grace. There was no bitterness in her expression. No desire to impress anyone, only quiet confidence. Vanessa thanked the foundation for the recognition and spoke briefly about the importance of giving children stability, kindness, and opportunity. Her voice remained calm and sincere. Every word carried purpose. Then, near the end of her remarks, she glanced toward the table where the children sat waiting. Her eyes softened instantly. The entire ballroom seemed to notice. Everything meaningful in my life began when I learned that love is not measured by what we receive, she said gently. It is measured by what we choose to give, especially when no one is watching. The audience applauded again, but Nathan could not move. Because while everyone else heard an inspirational speech, he heard something else. He heard the voice of the woman he once loved. And for the first time that night, a frightening possibility entered his mind. If Vanessa had spent 5 years building a life centered around children, family, and unconditional love, perhaps the greatest chapter of that story had never been shown to him at all. When the applause finally faded, Vanessa stepped down from the stage and returned to her table. The children immediately surrounded her, each eager to share a different observation about the evening. Nathan watched from across the ballroom as she listened to every word with patient attention. Then something happened that made his heart stop. The little girl reached into a small handbag and carefully removed a folded photograph. Vanessa smiled when she saw it. One of the boys pointed at the picture and said something that caused all 3 children to laugh. Curious and unsettled, Nathan found himself moving closer through the crowd. Not close enough to intrude, just close enough to see. The photograph slipped from the little girl's hands and floated gently onto the floor. Before anyone noticed, it landed near Nathan's polished shoes. He bent instinctively and picked it up. The moment his eyes reached the image, the air seemed to leave his lungs. It was an old photograph. A photograph he knew well. 5 years earlier, during a charity marathon in Central Park, someone had taken a candid picture of him and Vanessa sitting on a park bench. Neither of them had known the camera was there. Vanessa was laughing. Nathan was looking at her instead of the lens. It had always been one of his favorite photographs because it captured something real. Not wealth, not status, just happiness. Slowly, he turned the picture over. Written in careful handwriting on the back were 4 simple words. The day we smiled. Nathan stared at the message. The handwriting belonged to Vanessa. His chest tightened. Why would 3 children carry a photograph taken years before they were born? Before he could process the question, one of the boys approached him. "Excuse me, sir," the child said politely. "That belongs to my sister." Nathan looked down into a pair of familiar blue eyes. Up close, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The same color, the same shape. Even the faint crease that appeared when the boy concentrated looked painfully familiar. Nathan handed over the photograph with trembling fingers. "Thank you," the child replied. Then he smiled. Nathan felt his heart stumble. He had seen that smile thousands of times in his own reflection. The boy hurried back to the table, unaware of the storm he had left behind. Nathan remained frozen. Across the room, Vanessa had noticed the exchange. Their eyes met for the first time that evening. Neither spoke. Neither looked away. The distance between them suddenly felt very small. There was no anger in her expression, no triumph, no accusation. Only a quiet sadness that seemed older than 5 years. Then one of the children tugged gently on her sleeve. Vanessa looked down and smiled before returning her attention to them. Nathan swallowed hard. In that moment, another memory surfaced. The final day of their marriage. Vanessa standing in their apartment with tears she refused to let fall. She had tried to tell him something. He remembered that now. He remembered her asking for one more conversation, one more chance. But he had been too hurt, too stubborn, too convinced that the story was already over. Looking at those children now, Nathan felt a terrible realization begin to take shape. Perhaps the most important words Vanessa had ever tried to tell him were the very words he never stayed long enough to hear. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of speeches and applause, yet Nathan remembered almost none of it. The photograph remained vivid in his mind. The handwriting, the children's faces, the memory of Vanessa trying to speak on the final day of their marriage. By the time dessert was served, one thought had become impossible to ignore. He needed answers. Not next week. Not tomorrow. Tonight. Gathering every ounce of courage he possessed, Nathan crossed the ballroom. Each step felt heavier than the last. Investors greeted him. Board members called his name. He barely heard them. His attention remained fixed on the woman seated at the table near the stage. Vanessa noticed him approaching long before he arrived. Her expression remained calm, composed, the same quiet strength he had been noticing all evening. The children, however, looked openly curious. Nathan stopped a respectful distance away. For a moment, neither adult spoke. The silence stretched between them, carrying 5 years of unanswered questions. Finally, Vanessa offered a polite nod. Nathan, hearing his name in her voice again, felt strangely unfamiliar. Familiar and distant at the same time. "Vanessa," he replied softly. One of the boys looked back and forth between them. "Mom, is this someone you know?" The question landed with unexpected force. Vanessa glanced at the child before returning her attention to Nathan. "Yes," she answered gently. "A long time ago, we knew each other." Nathan felt something twist inside his chest. Knew each other. Once, they had shared a home, a future, dreams. Now they were reduced to a sentence small enough for a child to understand. The little girl studied him carefully. "You look sad," she observed with innocent honesty. Vanessa immediately gave her a gentle look. "Ava." "What?" the little girl asked. "He does." Nathan surprised himself by smiling faintly. "She is not wrong." The children exchanged amused glances. Then the second boy extended a small hand with the confidence only children possess. "I am Noah," he announced proudly. "That is Ethan. And she is Ava." Nathan shook the boy's hand. The simple gesture felt far more significant than it should have. Nice to meet you, Noah. The child grinned. Once again, Nathan saw himself reflected in that smile. It was becoming harder to breathe normally, harder to think clearly. Eventually, the children became distracted by a nearby dessert display and wandered a short distance away under Vanessa's watchful eye. For the first time all evening, Nathan and Vanessa stood alone. The noise of the ballroom seemed to fade. They are wonderful children, Nathan said quietly. Vanessa followed his gaze. Her expression softened instantly. They are. There was pride in her voice. Love. Devotion. Everything he had admired about her years ago remained untouched. Nathan swallowed carefully. Vanessa, I need to ask you something. She looked at him steadily. Not hostile. Not defensive. Simply waiting. Nathan felt his pulse hammering in his ears. Every instinct told him the answer might change his life forever. Across the ballroom, the children laughed beneath the crystal lights. Nathan looked toward them once more before returning his gaze to Vanessa. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, he asked the question that had been haunting him since the moment he saw those blue eyes. Who are they, Vanessa? For a moment, Vanessa did not answer. The sounds of the gala continued around them, softened by distance and music, yet the silence between them felt louder than anything else in the room. Nathan held her gaze, searching for anger, disappointment, or resentment. Instead, he found something far more difficult to face. Compassion. The kind of compassion that existed only after years of healing. Vanessa looked toward the children before speaking. They are my world, she said quietly. Nathan followed her gaze. Noah was explaining something animatedly to his brother, while Ava listened with patient skepticism. Their laughter drifted through the ballroom like sunlight breaking through clouds. Vanessa, Nathan said carefully, that is not what I asked. She nodded once, as if she had expected those words all along. Her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her water glass before relaxing again. No, she replied. It is not. Another silence settled between them. 5 years ago, Nathan would have rushed to fill it. Tonight he waited. Somewhere inside, he already knew the answer. He simply needed to hear it spoken aloud. Vanessa took a slow breath. The day I left, I tried to tell you something. Nathan felt his stomach drop. The memory returned with painful clarity. Vanessa, standing near the apartment doorway, her eyes red from crying, her voice trembling as she asked for one more conversation. One more minute. One more chance. He had refused, convinced there was nothing left worth hearing. I remember, he whispered. Vanessa nodded. You never let me finish. The words were gentle. That somehow made them hurt even more. Nathan lowered his eyes briefly. Every success he had achieved over the past 5 years suddenly felt insignificant compared to that single mistake. Across the ballroom, Ava waved enthusiastically toward her mother. Vanessa smiled and waved back. Then she turned toward Nathan again. A few weeks after the divorce papers were finalized, I learned I was pregnant. Nathan stopped breathing. The world seemed to narrow into a single moment. A single sentence. Everything else disappeared. The music, the conversations, the glittering ballroom. All of it faded beneath the weight of those words. Vanessa continued calmly. At first I wanted to call you. Then I remembered how certain you were that our marriage was over. I remembered the things that had been said. The accusations. The distrust. Nathan closed his eyes briefly. Shame washed over him. Every memory felt sharper now. Every decision heavier. When the doctors told me I was expecting triplets, I was terrified. Vanessa admitted with a small smile. But I was also grateful. Because suddenly I had 3 reasons to keep moving forward. Nathan looked toward the children again. Triplets. His children. The truth settled into his heart with breathtaking force. 5 birthdays. 5 Christmas mornings. 5 years of first words, first steps, and bedtime stories. All gone. Not stolen. Lost. Lost because of choices he had made. His throat tightened painfully. They are mine, he said softly. It was not a question. Vanessa met his gaze. For the first time that evening, emotion flickered behind her calm expression. Yes, Nathan, she said. They are yours. Across the ballroom, the children continued laughing beneath the crystal lights, completely unaware that in a single moment, their father had finally discovered the truth that had been waiting for him all along. The truth did not arrive with anger. It arrived with silence. Nathan stood beneath the golden glow of the ballroom lights and looked at the 3 children who had unknowingly carried a piece of his heart for 5 years. Noah was helping his brother balance a small dessert plate. Ava was carefully straightening a ribbon on her dress. Ordinary moments. Beautiful moments. Moments a father should have witnessed. Nathan felt tears gather in his eyes, but he did not look away. For too many years he had looked away from difficult truths. Not tonight. Why did you never tell me? He asked softly. Vanessa considered the question for a long moment. At first, I wanted to, she admitted. But every time I remembered how certain you were that I did not belong in your life anymore, I stopped myself. Then the children arrived. They needed stability. They needed peace. I chose to give them that. Nathan lowered his head. There was no defense he could offer. No explanation that could undo the past. I am sorry, he whispered. I know. Those words are not enough. Vanessa studied him quietly. No, she said. They are not. The honesty hurt. Yet Nathan welcomed it. For once, he did not want comfort. He wanted truth. Then something unexpected happened. Noah walked over and tugged gently on Nathan's sleeve. Are you okay? The little boy asked. Nathan looked down at his son. His son. Even thinking the words felt miraculous. I think so, Nathan replied with a faint smile. Noah nodded thoughtfully. Mom says people can be sad and happy at the same time. Nathan glanced toward Vanessa. She smiled slightly. The wisdom sounded exactly like something she would teach her children. Your mom is very smart, Nathan said. Noah grinned. I know. The simple exchange loosened something inside him. For the next several minutes, the children spoke freely about school, soccer games, piano lessons, and favorite books. Nathan listened to every word as though each sentence were a priceless gift. He learned that Ava loved drawing. Ethan wanted to become an engineer. Noah dreamed of designing roller coasters. Small details. Precious details. The kind that built a lifetime. As the gala slowly came to an end, guests began leaving beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. The city lights shimmered beyond the windows. For the first time in years, Nathan felt no desire to rush back to work. No interest in the deals waiting on his desk. There was only this moment. This family. This second chance standing quietly before him. Outside the hotel entrance, a cool Manhattan breeze drifted through the night air. The children climbed into the waiting car, still talking excitedly about the evening. Before Vanessa followed them, Nathan spoke one final time. I do not expect forgiveness tonight, he said. I do not expect anything. But if there is even the smallest chance, I would like to know them. And maybe one day earn the right to know you again too. Vanessa looked at him for several seconds. Then she stepped closer. Not close enough to erase the past. Just close enough to acknowledge the future. One day at a time, Nathan. He nodded. One day at a time. A gentle smile touched her lips. Then, after a pause that seemed to hold 5 years of pain, growth, and healing, Vanessa leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on his cheek. It was not a promise. It was not a return to what had been. It was something far more meaningful. Grace. Nathan watched as she entered the car beside their children. As the vehicle disappeared into the glowing Manhattan night, he stood beneath the city lights with a full heart and a humbled soul. Sometimes redemption does not arrive as a grand victory. Sometimes it arrives as an empty seat finally waiting at the family table. And for the first time in 5 years, Nathan believed that seat might one day be his.